Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Dr. Mira Brancu. Mira is the founder and CEO of TowerScope, an award-winning social impact consulting firm that helps executives and their teams to lead well today and better navigate tomorrow. To this work, she brings 20 plus years of experience in healthcare, research, and education, including a leadership career at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and a faculty appointment at Duke University. Mira is the author of A Millennial's Guide to Workplace Politics and writes about women in leadership for Psychology Today. She was awarded the Early Career Woman Psychologist in Management Award in 2020 from the Society of Psychologists in Leadership, the 2022 Hero Award by A Lot of Love for her research group's contribution to demonstrating the impact of this nonprofit's work on homeless shelter outcomes, and identified as one of the top 50 influential women in the Triangle this year in North Carolina. Her company received the 2021 Corporate Philanthropy Award from the Triangle Business Journal. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mira Brancu. Welcome, Mira.
Thank you, Tammy. Nice to be here with you today.
It's great to have you here. I love reading your bio and sharing all the experiences that you've had, and I know there's so much more to it. But as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning. So take us back to those earlier years and how they may or may not have informed where you are today.
So I was thinking, how far back should I go? And I'll just go there. I'm going to go far.
Go.
My family and I came to the U.S. as Jewish political refugees under a sponsorship program, and I came here when I was 6 years old to New York. That's where we lived. And as a result of me not knowing the language and being in a brand new culture, I took a lot of time to observe people and to better understand my new surroundings, to better understand how people interacted, to understand how things worked, how the popular kids became popular, why I was teased, and all of these, I think, probably laid the foundation for my interest in becoming a psychologist. Before I became a psychologist, I was a school counselor, and that was part of it too. I was interested in those pieces around education and schooling and supporting and understanding why kids thrived. When they didn't thrive, how can we help them thrive? And then later on, when I realized that wasn't quite the right career for me, for various reasons that I could share later on, I sort of respecialized, went back to school to become a clinical psychologist. And interestingly, about 3 years in, my advisor said, Mira, I'm not quite sure you want to be a clinical psychologist. I feel like you might be interested in administration or psychology or something like that. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But of course, as these things go, your mentors sometimes know you better than you know yourself. I started my first job as a clinical psychologist within the Department of Veterans Affairs. That was 15 years ago. And in a non-traditional career path, I didn't become a staff clinical psychologist. I got a job that supported a research study where I was doing assessments for the research study. I thought, okay, I'll stick around for a year and then I'll figure out what I want to do. But immediately, as I started that, I started doing my thing, which is try to figure out how to improve and streamline the systems and improve the workflow and help people get along and support team members. And the director of the center, the research center, saw that and it was like, would you be interested in helping me with standard operating procedures? And would you be interested in, managing this and managing that? And that started my management and leadership career. Without me ever thinking that's the direction I wanted to go into. But all of these were like little seeds that were sort of sprouting up along the way, understanding and being interested in systems, being interested in how to navigate a complex, culture, navigating things. So that's kind of how I got started.
I'm curious, when you talk about sort of the progression of coming to this country as a political refugee, and we didn't notate the country you came from.
Romania.
Okay.
Romania back then was a communist dictatorship. And Jewish people also were probably less than 1% of the population as a result of what happened in World War II, and where Romania stood in that. But my parents, no, not my parents, my grandparents were, were government officials within the Communist Party, because that was one way that Jewish people could have an opportunity to have some position of power and good salary and stability.
Wow.
That's a fascinating, complex situation, but without getting too far into it, caused some tension in terms of the fact that my parents and their generation were not aligned with their parents in that decision. And that's kind of what created some tensions and some decision to say.
I can imagine. So I'm thinking, and in just even having that as a framework, and the degree to which you were very young at the time, but you were still in and around and exposed to some of that, and then coming to this country, coming to New York, having so many adjustments to make. And it makes sense that, that you, like you said, you sort of started off as a school counselor, and then that there was something out of your own experiences and the clinical psychology degree. And even then your mentor saying, I don't know, there's something else there for you. And then it kind of sort of, or in a somewhat organic way, sounds like it kind of blossomed. And I just wonder if either something out of your own background informed that in some way, or whether it was just innately who you are. But it does seem like there's a way in which I could see where you might be still, maybe I'm overanalyzing this, but thinking like, there you are, 6 years old, coming to this country. What a shock. And trying to just make sense out of how things work.
Yeah, I think there's
continuing to, right?
Something there in terms of the combination of influences. Number one, when you come to a new country as an immigrant, regardless of reason, I do see that as a very entrepreneurial endeavor. It's taking a major risk with no guarantee of success, or the desire for something better, to build something better. And that was definitely instilled in me. The second is, both in Romania and in the US, you have to be incredibly resourceful to get your needs met. I saw that with my mom. I saw that with my dad. The level of resourcefulness to get needs met is incredible. One very small story about resourcefulness I could recall is in Romania, the food was rationed, and so in order for you to be able to get your week's groceries, so to get both bread and chicken. You stood on a chicken line for 4 hours and you stood on a bread line for 4 hours. But by the time 4 or 5 hours reached, you can't then have access to the other. So my mom would place me as a 4 or 5-year-old on the bread line while she stood on the chicken line. And we stood there. I stood there as a 4 or 5-year-old for 4 hours waiting to get the bread.
Wow.
And like, that was kind of brilliant resourcefulness on her part. Oh, I've got 2 family members here. We can get both this week, and those kinds of things that she sort of came up with. So that's number one, the entrepreneurial and resourcefulness, risk taking kind of stuff. Number 2 is, I think that as a result of a combination of people in my family being in politics, being within a country where you have to be incredibly careful about what you say because you are constantly being surveilled, and be really thoughtful about navigating that. And then my parents, who, there's so many engineers and artists in the family. The fact that I did not become an architect or an engineer or some kind of math something, was frowned upon. Like, I mean, psychology is not a thing, So, but I do think I applied it in a different way. I think that by me understanding how to create well-oiled machines within a system, but using the mechanism of people instead of tools, and helping them be very politically savvy and diplomatic and thoughtful about their surroundings and how to navigate, and avoid pitfalls. All of that, I really think, were all planted early on. I just didn't realize that. I was just good at it.
Yeah. I can see where thinking about systems, operations, complex cultures, there, even though when you're talking about people, it looks different, but there is a bit of an engineering mindset that needs to be applied to that. So I can see where that influence may have been part of what drew you to some of those things.
Absolutely.
And to even think about how can we make this study run better, or what would help the research to pop out better in terms of what results we're getting, or whatever that was. And yet complementing that with your training as a psychologist would just make it a richer picture. So most of your time in the Veterans Administration, you were there for, I think, over a decade, right?
Yes, I'm still there, but in a different role.
Okay.
But yeah, most of that time, for about a decade, I was in management and leadership roles within health research. Okay.
But you're still there now.
Yes. So now I serve as a senior organizational development psychologist. So I'm fully into what I guess is my full self.
So, well, before we get to where you are now, let's take the journey. So you spent over a decade in the research end of things, and what kinds of research were you involved with there at the Veterans Administration?
Yeah, so it's mental health research. So the center that I was at focused on post-deployment mental health of Iraq and Afghanistan era veterans.
Oh, wow.
And then I also, for a short while, served as interim director of another research center that focused on a similar population. So I was deputy director of one center, served as interim director for another center. And then eventually I supported all 17 mental health centers of excellence with their communication across the network and improving that, as well as their site visits for the work that they did, and the productivity tracking system that sort of track, how they were doing. So it was kind of a combination operations, communications type of role. It was, a really great opportunity to learn how different centers run. And that, really helped me be interested in the different ways that you can run a successful center of excellence.
Well, and you said there were 17 centers. So were they spread out geographically? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, they're spread out geographically. They're all over the country. They each focus either on a mental health condition or an era. And ours was a little bit more, stretched out in terms of like a couple of eras and mental health conditions related to post-deployment. So sometimes they also focused on a situation that brought them, sort of together.
Wow. So the impact of that work across all those centers was enormous. I can imagine.
Yeah. And my role wasn't necessarily overseeing their work, but really like helping them have mechanisms to communicate, coordinate opportunities to collaborate, and ways to, showcase their value, different ways of tracking metrics and
very important work. I mean, we hear all the time about our veterans and all the different issues that they face after having served. And there's probably a lot that you've learned along the way as well, in terms of things that can really be helpful.
Yeah, the mission is amazing. It's hard not to love the mission of the VA.
Yeah.
And because of this population is a very unique subpopulation because it's public health, within federal government.
Yeah.
So you see some really complex issues, and those issues are best served under an umbrella where you know how to address such complexity. And that said, I did learn things that I even apply and use now. Like, my father-in-law has Parkinson's, and you see these random sets of symptoms, and my husband would be like, I don't understand, why is this and why is this, and I'm like, oh well, this is tied to this and this is tied to this and this is how it's together. And comorbid mental health and complicated medical conditions. Yes, multiple medical conditions. It's easy for me to say, oh, he doesn't have dementia. This sounds like a medication issue. And then I ask a couple of questions, when was the last time you took this? When was the last time you didn't take this? Oh, maybe we should have you talk to the doctor about that medication. And it's not something that the typical caregiver would know to do.
No.
Had such amazing access to this kind of training and research that I can pick up those things, even as a psychologist,
Yeah. No, absolutely. I can see that. And that's where the crossover is too, though. I think when we look at things like that, and we have to unpack them more and ask more of those questions. So that's really important. So at some point, though, you moved from the research area into more of the organizational development space. Was that the next sort of pivot point for you within the Veterans Affairs Administration?
It was a fairly natural next step for me. When I served as the interim director of that center, I had the opportunity to receive consulting services from the National Center for Organizational Development within the VA, and changed the trajectory of my interest because I really loved the work that we were doing with helping me become a better leader and then helping me improve the team and the organization. And so I continued developing that skill set along the way after that. And so as I was developing myself and I got an executive coach and, really sort of developed myself, my teams, the organizational stuff, I had an eye on this National Center for Organizational Development, and there was an opportunity that came about 3 years ago where they were looking for more folks, and I applied. And they say third time's a charm. The first 2 times didn't work out, but the third time, then it worked out. They accepted my interview and application, extended me an offer. And so that's when I made the official switch. Now, I had 2 years before that already started a business focused on organizational development, focused on supporting women in leadership and team development. So I was already on my way interested in that. And it was 2 years after I started the business that opportunity came about that I just could not pass up. I knew that it could mean me having to slow down the growth of my business to come back full time into this new role. And I asked myself, was I willing to do that with my business for this opportunity? And I said, I think it's worth being surrounded by odd ducks like me who are clinical psychologists who specialize informally into OD work. And so that was a very smart move because it aligned everything that I was doing inside and outside of the VA. And it really catapulted my learning, and what I learned as a business owner and OD practitioner, I brought into the VA. What I learned from my VA work helped me be a better practitioner in general. And so it fed each other really well. So I was very proud of that decision because it was not an easy decision, obviously.
I bet. I can imagine. So but you didn't shut down your business. Your business is still going, right?
Yeah. So, it's going and growing.
Uh-oh. And you've also been teaching too.
I don't teach. That is a little assumption that people make when they see that I'm an associate professor at Duke University, that they think I also teach, but I don't.
Okay.
That was never part of the plan. Instead, that position and promotion from assistant to associate professor was all related to the work that I did for the VA in terms of the research and to grow grant-funded opportunities for both VA and Duke University. It's a partnership.
Got it. I should have known that. There are plenty of people with the title professor who focus on research and are not teaching. So I should have known. But anyway, so you've just moved us up to fairly present time. So you've had this evolution from school counselor to clinical psychologist, although based on what you're talking about, you're trained in clinical psychology, but in terms of the practices and things, you've really looked towards the research side of things. And actually, I myself in my early days looked towards a master's and PhD in clinical psych myself and realized how research focused that could be, and decided not to go that route because I didn't want to just focus on research. But I know there's a lot of research foundations in that, but it sounds like you really carried that through, and out of that, people recognized your proclivity for organizational matters, systems, and things. And so it kind of evolved, but it was also nice that those things were recognized and that's what you really enjoyed more than anything. So did you ever really practice clinical psychology as a clinician, or only as part of your training? Or
I did it in during my internship year. So that was a full this. And then when I started with this research center, I was doing the assessment under the umbrella of research studies. And then I was also doing clinical trials where I was the clinical therapist under a research trial. So trying to new therapies out.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I was kind of like at the forefront of the clinical work, but it didn't last very long. It probably lasted a couple of years.
Yeah.
Maybe years.
Yeah. But it was definitely part of the foundation. I mean, I can imagine that experience was useful in terms of then seeing how certain research protocols would be set up and how to really look at how those were going to be effective, or how to look at outcomes and things like that as well.
Absolutely. And because of the fact that I attended so many meetings where researchers and clinicians came together to review what was working, what was not working, what are we adjusting, how do we stay close to a clinical protocol. You know, you get a pretty intense, in-depth understanding of how the mechanisms of change work. And again, like, broad picture here, it doesn't matter if it's therapy or coaching or consulting or engineering. What you need to know is, what are the mechanisms of change?
Yeah.
Can you identify, can you diagnose and pinpoint the leverage point, and then do something with that leverage point that hits other aspects that can create the flywheel of the greatest change? It's very translatable kind of knowledge.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can easily see how that then translates into your work around leadership and organizational development, because really those are, as much as we can't, those of us who are coaches and do some of that work, we can't call ourselves clinicians, but there's a whole clinical side to that work. You have to understand people, you have to understand behavior, and what triggers what, and what makes the dominoes fall and what makes them stay upright, and how people work together. I mean, those things are all a big part of that picture. So I can imagine that is instrumental. So when you said something a few moments ago, like, I'm one of those, kind of quirky psychologists who went into, organizational development. I'm thinking, I know a ton of psychologists who went into organizational development. Just some of them may have started off in clinical. Some have, started more in a pathway of what they call industrial psychology, right?
That's the traditional route into this kind of work. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it does feel like that they both really kind of work together in parallel very nicely.
Absolutely.
So now 3 years ago, you joined the National Center for Organizational Development, which is under the Veterans Affairs Administration. So what does that look like now for you, and what kinds of things are you spending your days doing, and that I know you're glad that you've arrived there, but it's been 3 years, so you've had a chance to really kind of get planted there. What kinds of things do you work on there? And then let's talk about your business as well.
Yeah, my two jobs, right?
Yeah.
So I'm Department of Veterans Affairs. So at the National Center for Organizational Development, we do a variety of things, but the umbrella that the division I'm under is under consulting psychology, consulting services. And the focus there is leadership coaching and team development, and some, additional kinds of organizational development work. We don't do all organizational development work, but we do some. And a lot of it is working with leaders and teams, including executives across the system at hospitals as well as central office, supporting them with trying to become either individually more effective leaders, or help their teams or system become more effective, efficient, improve employee engagement, morale, address burnout, civility, how people work together effectively is really like focus.
Yeah. Is that all? No, just kidding.
In a system that's been so disrupted, right? Healthcare is one of the major disrupted systems in the last. as a result of COVID.
Right.
We have all kinds of need around how to navigate the uncertainty and upheaval and ups and downs of the changes that were made. How do you address the fact that some people have gotten comfortable with remote work, but this is healthcare, it's direct care, right? But not everybody needs to be directly in the quote unquote office or in the clinic. So how do leaders navigate meeting both the needs of their patients and the needs of their employees? And then, the kind of rapid fire decision making that sometimes needs to happen that doesn't allow them to take enough time to reflect and focus and, develop longer term strategies. You see that in other systems as well, not just healthcare. It's just that it's kind of more intense in these disrupted systems, right?
Well, and I would imagine very intense when it comes to inpatient facilities and places where you really, there's becomes fewer choices about whether people are on site or not. And yet there's been so many definite, different issues when it comes to that. We won't get into all of that now, but I can imagine. And so your reach is not just inpatient, it's also outpatient, all kinds of programs and services that the Veterans Affairs Administration offers. Is that right?
Absolutely. We generally tend to target the highest level leadership that could make an impact. So there is a concern about one clinic, we might ask, like, are other clinics having the same concern? So maybe we don't want to target just the one clinic leadership, but instead a higher level of leadership that has oversight over multiple clinics being affected. But sometimes it's also executive leadership teams that are savvy and proactive enough to know that if they're going to be working together and there's been some upheaval and there's been some reorganization and they're somewhat new to each other, that getting started on the right foot with strong team development up front gets them farther faster, right? There's other people on the other end of the spectrum that have experienced significant organizational trauma or turmoil. Maybe they landed in the media and the media hasn't treated them well. And now, they're feeling kind of beaten up, and low morale or things like that. And so it's getting back on track, focused, cohesive, supporting each other, psychological safety and things like that.
You're trying to work with leadership to then help them to bring things along within their own facilities or regions and areas, right? And so how does that juxtapose with your own business? What made you decide to start your own business? It sounds like your work with the Veterans Affairs Administration could be easily a full-time plus job as it is. I mean,
it is a full-time job. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I navigate that in a number of ways. One, I do work nights and weekends, two, I do have a flexible type of schedule where I can work certain hours within a time band. And so I can sort of flex around. And then, of course, I take time off and take leave as necessary. And so has been nice to be able to do that. With the business, I also hire other people to support the work. So I can't do it all by myself.
Right.
Time job. And so I do hire contractors to support the work as well when necessary, when it's a much larger job. And, but what led me to it, 5 years ago, I was facing some important decision making. I was offered a very high level leadership role within the VA, an opportunity though that required me to move to DC. And I thought to myself, would I be willing to uproot my family at this time in our lives to DC for this kind of position.
Mm-hmm.
And while the position was incredibly compelling opportunity, we were just not at that place where we felt like we were ready to uproot. And it was before the opportunity to, have these remote roles. That was not like a sort of option.
Yeah.
So I turned it down, and somewhat around that time, maybe a little bit before, a little after, I was also starting to wonder whether Congress, whether the administration would continue supporting research in the VA in the way that I wanted to keep my job. I was not in a 100% permanent type of position. So at any point, if research was no longer funded, my position would no longer be funded.
I see.
So I thought to myself, I should probably not put all my eggs in one basket. I should probably have a backup plan. What would that be?
I see. Yeah, makes sense.
That's when I started thinking deeply about like what made me feel really fulfilled in the work that I did. And I started writing out like, what was I good at? And then crossing out the things that I was good at, but I didn't enjoy.
Yay!
And then highlighting among the things that I was good at and enjoyed, what could I make money doing? That was also a major need or trend. That's called the hedgehog system, where you pinpoint that sweet spot in the middle of that. And what I came up with was I really enjoyed supporting women in leadership, or women aiming towards leadership roles, and providing them, with a path with how to make those decisions, how to navigate a large complex system, how to be visible in that large complex system for the work that they did, navigating workplace politics. All of these things started coming together for me when I really started thinking about what I enjoyed most. And that's how it started.
I see. That makes a ton of sense. It's good that you had that thought about what happens if, because I think a lot of people get comfortable in certain roles and they really don't. It's almost hard for them to even go to that spot where they even begin to imagine that something could change dramatically. And then they're blindsided. And I think it happens more and more often lately. So,
I always have an option B, C, and D,
Ooh, B, C, and D.
Yes, I'm already looking for my fifth career, and I know what my interest is right now is real estate. And so I'm starting to start like teaching myself more about this, real estate investing and real estate development. And like, I'm fascinated by that. And that's like maybe 5 to 10 years down the line as a fifth or sixth career. But, the point is that I don't sit complacent. I am constantly thinking about iterating and redefining myself and my work.
Folks, whoever's listening to this, take very careful notes, because this is definitely a really great example of how I think most of us should be thinking about our careers. And it's not to say, and as you can tell, the way Mira is talking about her career right now, she loves what she's doing for the most part. She's very committed to it. But there's nothing wrong with thinking about some of the other what ifs and taking an interest in other things and having a plan B, C, and D. I often recommend that people have at least a plan A, B, and C. I hadn't gone as far as D, so that intrigued me right away. But I think where you go with D is further down the road of like, I'm going to do something completely different, right? Like D for different. I usually say, have a plan A. That's your kind of ideal work situation. B is work off of your strengths and try to, like it as much as you can, but it makes a good living. C is down to brass tacks. Plan C is I just have to bring in some cash. And, that sometimes people don't think that far. But then D could be, what do I want to do that's different? Right? I love it. I just made up your B, C, and D for you, I think. But I think it's really important to pay attention to this, because we live in a time where things are, I think, even more uncertain than they ever have been. And I don't say that to be like scary or negative, as much as to say, more than ever, we need to really be in charge of our own work lives, whatever that looks like. And if there's something that you are curious about, look into it, learn more about it. You don't have to dive in with both feet, but just take a peek around the corner and see what's there, and fuel your curiosity. And I also really appreciate what you were saying about, I did an inventory of myself and I looked at what am I really good at? And then I filtered out, what do I really like doing? And I think that's key, because too often I find that people stop at the benchmark of what am I good at? And sometimes you're really good at things that you don't really enjoy, and you get stuck in those things you're really good at, and you climb the ladder and you get stuck in both that ladder and the income it provides and all that, and you get stuck in being unhappy. And I know you would agree with this. That's no way to live.
No, absolutely. And I think it's just being blinded by the allure of other people and needing you.
Yes.
And just because you're good at it and other people want you to or need you to do it, like, that's compelling, but that's not fulfilling.
That's right. I like that. That's compelling, but not fulfilling. Ooh, we could make a song about that or something. I don't know. I'm loving that.
Down as a slogan.
I am. I'm writing it down right now. That's going to end up on social media after this episode. Compelling, but not fulfilling. I love it. But that's true. That's true. And we have to catch ourselves, right? Because when most of us want to be helpful. And so sometimes we think, well, that's compelling, right? I'm good at something. I can be helpful. Is that not good enough?
Right. It's so easy to fall into the trap.
Right.
That must mean that would be fulfilling. Not necessarily.
Right. And while, we could say, well, there's nothing wrong with that, it only becomes wrong when you find yourself not wanting to get out of bed in the morning, or just feeling like you don't care anymore, even if you're helping people, right?
Yeah, I do think that there's something about losing yourself in that, and it takes away your agency.
Yes.
When you make a decision because it fills somebody else's need instead of your own.
I'll just leave it at that. Yes. So you've got a very full agenda these days. Anything else that we've missed along the way here that we need to make sure we shine a light on? I don't want to miss anything here.
I think I'll just share that yes, even despite the full agenda, I have a new internet radio show and podcast that I just started. That's called The Hard Skills.
Oh.
Yes, The Hard Skills is in an oppositional way of saying, don't call this the soft skills anymore.
I love it.
Because they're really hard to develop. So that's what that's about. And it's focused on those quote unquote, not soft skills to develop as a leader, especially within healthcare and academic environments. And I am starting a membership community, membership community focused on leadership development as well, for that kind of cohort of women who are within academic and research and STEM environments. But we're starting with a 9-week beta test of of this, and a mini intensive to get feedback from the initial founding members. And so if folks are interested, I'm going to be posting more about that on my website, gotowerscope.com, and on LinkedIn under Mira Brancu. And you can also sign up for my newsletter to learn more about that.
Excellent. Excellent. We will definitely shine a light on all of that in the show notes. In fact, I know some people I want to point in your direction. So this is very exciting. And I love the title, The Hard Skills. I'm very excited about this. And I can see where building these things and also the way you're being inclusive around it, even though it sounds like you're taking on more, I have a good feeling that you're also building people around it so that it's not all on your shoulders, you're sharing it with others. And
yes.
So
100%.
It doesn't, I just can't imagine, given the kind of work you do, that you are building a tower of burnout for yourself at the same time. So it's, I just think it's so exciting to see where this is all going. I will be watching and following for sure.
And probably coming on the show at some point.
Well, twist my arm. No, I love it. So before we wrap up, as you know, a lot of people listening to this are going to be very interested in the work that you're doing and are also thinking about their own next steps. What would be a key piece of advice that you might offer somebody who is thinking about their next steps or their next career transition?
Yeah. Building on what you just said, don't do it alone.
Yeah.
Don't sit with your thoughts alone and ruminate and over deliberate everything, because you will not move. And instead, build people around you that, number one, you feel elevate you and energize you, that inspire you to be your very best. Number two, mentors, coaches, anyone who can help guide you to where you have not been before and support you in that endeavor. Number three, professional organizations or networks of people who have been there, done that, and you can interview and learn from. That's exactly what I did to reinvent myself, and that's exactly what I'm going to continue to do the next time I reinvent myself someday.
I love it. That's great. Excellent, excellent advice. All of the links and all the resources you've mentioned here today will be in the show notes. Mira, I can't thank you enough, not only for being here today, but for all the amazing work that you're putting out into the world, supporting our veterans and all the other people that, the women leaders that you're working on behalf of. It's really an honor to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a real honor and pleasure to be here with you, Tammy.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Mira Brancu. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her early life, transitions, and her current work. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 232. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or you can request it through your local public library. If you were inspired by this episode with Mira, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, subscribing is always free. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would write a brief and honest review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find. just go to my website, tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast, click the link near the Apple Podcast button to follow the instructions provided there. You can also help to sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I always love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.